One of the reasons why electric cars are going to be replacing internal combustion engines in the not too distant future is the amazing amount of innovation in the battery industry. And I'm going to talk to Dr. Kai-Philipp Kairies, who is our sort of resident battery expert. He's the CEO of ACCURE Battery Intelligence, and he joins us from Aachen, Germany. So welcome to the interview, Kai-Philipp.
Hi, Markham.
We're going to talk about sodium ion batteries today because I ran across an article where VW has installed sodium ion batteries in a little urban electric car called the Seahole E10X. But this thing is amazing. It's a $9,000 car, which for North Americans and Europeans is hard to wrap your head around something that inexpensive, but it gets 250 kilometers of range. It charges relatively quickly. It seems like sodium ion may deliver on those inexpensive electric vehicles that Elon Musk promised, 3-4 years ago.
It might. And I think it's a very exciting development. And I'm particularly excited to see a new technology in an entry-level car. Typically we see that new technologies are being phased in very expensive cars like Tesla did with the Roadster and then the Model S, or like Lucid and Rivian did. And so bringing a new technology straight away into an entry-level vehicle shows that the market has matured. We're now aiming for the mass markets, and that's good. And I think sodium ion is really, of all the different developments we see in the industry, one of the most exciting ones, particularly because it addresses, entry-level requirements and can really be a game changer.
What can you give us describe for us how sodium ion is different than lithium ion?
Yeah, sure. So in principle, it's a similar methodology. You have an anode, you have a cathode, an electrolyte, and you have ions taxiing back and forth between the anode and the cathode. And sodium ion batteries use similar manufacturing techniques as lithium ion batteries, but different materials. So where in a lithium ion battery, the cathode is either made from ternary metals like NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt, NCA, or iron phosphate, which we have been discussing quite a bit in the last months. Sodium ion uses a sodium intercalation metal like Prussian blue, which is basically iron with a bit of carbon and nitrogen. On the anode, lithium ion batteries use graphite mostly. For sodium ion batteries, you need to use a slightly different form of graphite, hard carbon, but it's still similar enough to leverage experiences that we already have. And the beauty of this concept is really it does not use expensive metals. It does not use lithium, where we have seen huge spikes in the last years, 600% up in 2021 to 2022. And sodium is really abundantly available. Iron is as well. So we're not looking into supply chain issues on raw materials here.
So is the promise here, Kai-Philipp, that we've got a chemistry that uses common materials, that brings the cost way down. It uses the same manufacturing process as lithium ion, so it's easy to scale up. And I see in the article I was reading, the companies that are developing this, which are the big Chinese companies. I think that's another point that we should maybe talk about. These aren't startups that are bringing this technology to the market. It's the big guys who already know, are the two biggest suppliers in the world, and they can scale it up relatively quickly. Is that all fair comment?
Yes, absolutely. So I think really the one main reason why we should be excited about that is because it's backed by CATL, which is the largest by far battery manufacturer in the world. Market share 37%, I believe, last year. So if they double down on a technology, they alone have the market power to scale it up. However, with every new battery breakthrough technology, we should take a very close look at the technology level, technology readiness level. And we are far from serial production right now. So we have seen, promising, and I want to say very promising results, but it will take probably until 2024, 2025 until we see actual mass production. So it's not that we can all expect to hop into a car powered by sodium ion batteries next year, but we see, taking two steps back, we see a massive shift in the strategy that automakers are using. When Tesla first introduced LFP batteries into their entry-level models 3 years ago, maybe, people were shocked, saying, oh, no one's going to buy a car that only has 300 miles of range or 250 miles of range. So that would never work. And now all the other manufacturers are doing it as well. And now we're going even one step below, saying something that only has 80% maybe of iron phosphate batteries in terms of mileage and capacity would still work. I mean, that's what most experts, most battery or e-mobility experts have said all the time, but no one was listening to them because a car needs to go 500 miles. That's just a requirement that someone made up at some point. But with better charging infrastructure, 250 miles of range is good enough for 80% of the users. And if we can do it in a cheaper way and use less rare materials, that's great.
Now, we've seen over the years that the energy density of lithium-ion batteries has risen at an average of 7% a year. Is there the same opportunity to see that kind of improvement in energy density with sodium-ion?
Yes, I really believe that it's going to happen. And actually, CATL already pointed at that. So the production version that they're targeting now, I believe, is at 160 watt hours per kilogram. And, iron phosphate, I think when Tesla introduced iron phosphate batteries into their cars, it was just slightly above 200 watt hours per kilogram. So more, but not substantially more. And CATL already indicated that with their next generation, they will crack the 200 watt hours per kilogram as well, which would be quite a step. But I think it's reasonable. And it's such a young technology. There's so many optimization potentials, they have not leveraged yet. The first thing is, hey, make it stable, make it safe, make it work. And then you start optimizing energy density. So I believe there's a lot to come.
Is sodium ion a lot safer than lithium ion?
We will have to see. So, I mean, also sodium ion batteries store, a high amount of energy into a dense space. So no energy storage technology, whether fuels or batteries or hydrogen or whatever, is inherently safe. It's a lot of energy in a small space. There's always risk. We will have to see what typical failure mechanisms sodium ion batteries show. And that might be, a risk, because for lithium ion batteries, we have a very good understanding right now what we should expect. For sodium ions, that knowledge will need to be, made by experience. So from a theoretical level, in a steady state, they should be somewhat safer than lithium ion batteries, but given the somewhat more immature state of the technology, I would say it's hard to tell right now.
Now, your company, Kai-Philipp, provides cloud-based monitoring for battery systems, and you do both stationary and mobile. And I'm wondering at what point it just seems logical that EV manufacturers would either contract with a company like yours or develop it in-house and be able to provide that service so that they know ahead of time when a cell is going to fail, when it's got a defect, or is that something that's coming?
Thank you for the question. I do believe so. So, and I mean, we're working with many automotive and commercial vehicle groups around the world, and this topic has reached, I want to say, every OEM and also many fleet managers and asset managers today. As batteries make up more and more, become a larger part of the business, the risk associated with it becomes more important. And so companies, are trying all different options they have to optimize their, output and safeguard their operations. And I believe digital services are a very logical step in that journey. And it actually, coming back to the topic, it is the exact same thing for sodium ion batteries as with lithium ion batteries. We know that the production spread for sodium ion batteries will not be much better than for lithium ion batteries. So again, you have many different, slightly different cells in the field, and the weakest cell will define the performance and lifetime of the entire pack. So it makes a lot of sense to take a closer look at it from the very beginning instead of being surprised, by a sudden shutdown when you're on a highway.
Now, let's talk about the rest of the industry. You had mentioned in our conversation before we started the recording that lithium-ion battery prices had come way down already, and it looked like this was going to be a year. Are we back now to the point, where we were a few years ago, where we were talking about the continued rapid declines in the cost of lithium-ion?
So until the end of last year, people were actually really concerned that lithium-ion batteries will have a hard time in the next years because lithium carbonate and hydroxide prices had gone up quite substantially by a factor of 6. Nickel prices had spiked in 2021. And so actually last year, the average lithium-ion battery pack for the first time in a decade was more expensive than the year before. This had never happened before. It was exponentially down all the way, and now it went up. So all the alarm bells went off. But actually, the first quarter of this year showed that lithium prices are on the way to normalize. And nickel is also, for a longer time already, back on a high level, but not extreme. And so I think there's 2 drivers of that. One, actually, the largest demand side impact is always the Chinese EV market, which had relatively weak months. So the demand went down, and at the same time, the supply went up much quicker than anyone expected. OEM had started to get involved into mining long-term contracts to make sure that they get the lithium they need directly. And so we have, less demand, more supply, prices go down, pretty natural. And so I believe that we're basically stacking technology scaling curves on top of each other. So sodium ion batteries will fill a niche where lithium ion batteries might not have been able to be used anyhow. So I would say it's good to have more technologies, and they're not so much competing against each other, but they're competing against internal combustion engines. And I think the more and cheaper batteries we have, the faster the transition will go.
Are we rapidly heading to a situation, Kai-Philipp, where there are a plethora, there are many battery technologies, different chemistries, and they all have a niche, and therefore that takes the pressure off lithium ion?
I believe that 80% probably will still be lithium ion for the foreseeable future, because it's a very mature technology. If you just look at all the production capabilities that are being built, they will produce lithium ion batteries. Whereas, for example, sodium ion batteries, we have now one substantially large manufacturer, but one and a few startups. And so I think the market share will increase gradually, not so much disruptively. And then for stationary, there might be some space for zinc batteries, for example, with like Energi, for example. but the vast majority will still be lithium ion for the foreseeable future.
Well, Kai-Philipp, thank you very much. Always appreciate your insights.